Hey everyone, Clay here. Just wanted to let you know my graphic novel Bloody Hell is now for sale in stores and on Amazon. So if you'd like to help support the show, get yourself a copy of that. Thanks so much. Here's the show. Welcome to the Rotten Horror Picture Show. Hello. Welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about movies off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay, and with me, as always, is Amanda. How are you doing, Amanda?
Oh, I'm great. I'm not on any barbiturates.
Yet.
No one's locked me in a room.
Yet.
Everything's fine. How are you?
Good. Once we synchronize our
yes.
drug intake and also outtake.
Out.
What's it called when you kick drugs?
When you kick detox?
There you go.
Sure.
Yeah. Now we're synchronized.
It's already happening.
Yes. Yes, of course. We are today talking about number 166 on our list, David Cronenberg's Dead Ringers from 1988. It has an 83% Rotten Tomatoes score. Had you seen this before?
Okay, so I had, but I did not remember 90% of it.
Oh, okay. What did you remember from it? Just out of curiosity.
I remembered them dying at the end. That's pretty much it.
I was kind of hoping you were going to say, I remembered them achieving a lot at school very early.
Yeah. I remembered them being extraordinarily precocious 10-year-olds in their Toronto neighborhood, even though they have British accents. Yeah. Yeah, no, really, I think I remembered that it was like...
hey, the Queen's on their money, man.
Yeah, I guess so. It's just back then it was normal.
Yeah.
I had the impression that there were more mutants in this movie.
Oh.
Because the whole thing is he's all like, oh, their bodies are wrong and all of that.
Right.
And I feel like I maybe conflated this with other Cronenberg movies and was just like, yeah, it's some of that.
This is not a mutant-heavy Cronenberg movie.
No. One might argue there are 0 mutants in this.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you define mutant and how much of an asshole you want to be when you do it.
And we know for you that's maximum asshole.
depends on the person. Yeah, I had seen this. I've seen this maybe twice before. It's been a long time. I think we might have watched this one year for one of our movie marathons.
Yeah, I don't think I knew you guys very well for most of those. I think I maybe caught the last one or two.
Yeah, we stopped doing that in 2012, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because we used to do it on the dates that all lined up. So we did the first one on 6/6, 2006, et cetera, et cetera. So.
You could have done 2/22/22.
I wanted to, man. I tried to get Jim to do it, but first of all, there was a COVID flux again, and then I think maybe a snowstorm, and
slander.
Then it was also on a Tuesday.
They're just making excuses.
And he's got kids, and so.
I mean, they need to see some Cronenberg.
I think so. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, play the trailer for you, and then we will talk about Dead Ringers.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Beverly Mantle.
By every scientific measure, they are absolutely the same. They share everything.
You haven't had any experience until I've had it too. Bev, you've got to try the movie star. She's unbelievable.
Oh, doctor, you've cured me. You mean to say there's 2 of them? They're twins, dear.
I think we should drop her, Bev. You drop her. I'm in love with her. Can't be love if it does this to you, can it?
Doctor, I think there's something wrong with you.
Patients are getting strange. What are they? For working on mutant women.
From David Cronenberg, who in The Fly made the fantastic real.
Get him out of here!
Radical technology was required. Something radical is definitely required.
Now, David Cronenberg makes reality the ultimate fantasy. Dead Ringers.
Separation can be a terrifying thing.
Okay, Dead Ringers from 1988, number 166 on our list, 83% Rotten Tomatoes score. Directed by David Cronenberg, written by David Cronenberg, starring Jeremy Irons, Geneviève Bujold, Heidi von Pulaski, with a cameo by the guy from Scanners and twin call girls Cora and Mimsy, one of whom went on to become ADA Claire Kincaid on Law and Order.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
Amanda, what happens in Dead Ringers?
Elliot, a successful gynecologist, works at the same practice as his identical twin, Beverly. Elliot is attracted to many of his patients.
Sorry, that's a really weird way to phrase that.
Yeah, this is a summary. You're also gonna just have that face on the whole time.
Sure.
Elliot is attracted to many of his patients and has affairs with them. He inevitably loses interest and then will give the woman over to Beverly, the meeker of the two, without the woman knowing the difference. Beverly falls hard for one of the patients, Claire, but when she inadvertently deceives him, he slips into a state of madness. This is, I know I give these kind of pre-written synopsises a hard time, but this one is really just, I'm like, did you watch the movie?
Well, A+ for length, because I just copy and paste those when I put them in our write-up, and I need to hit 300 words however I can get there. So A+
yeah, so
there.
you hate the ones where it's just like, a detective must solve a murder.
I do. I really do not like those. I don't know how you inadvertently deceive somebody.
That's part of what made me laugh really hard about that, because it's such an interesting way of viewing what happens between Beverly and Claire in this movie.
I just don't even know how you do that. Wouldn't you need to?
She would have needed to do something, and she didn't.
Well, but I mean, like, how doesn't deception require intent? So So
yes.
How would one inadvertently deceive? So you kind of have to want to do it, I would say.
Yep. She would have had to decided to do something.
Yeah.
Which she didn't do.
Well, I guess we know whose side the person who wrote that is on here. Also, I really enjoy the focus on Elliot, who is really not in the movie that much.
I mean, he's in the movie.
Is,
he's just not the driving force behind 99% of what happens.
And the stuff that was focused on in that write-up is just
it's like Elliot, the hero of our film, is successful.
And it's a lot of stuff that arguably happens off screen. Like, it's like we understand that he hooks up with his patients. But
right, but it's not like...
It's not part of the... It's not like the main plot.
Yes.
Like this, anyway.
Yeah. That's like also saying, like, Elliot, who went to medical school...
Right. Yes.
Well, Clay, some things you'll find in this movie include kids who don't even know what fuck is.
Who does, really?
Not David Cronenberg.
We are going to talk about that. Trust me.
Yes, we are. Interior decorating by the mom from Beetlejuice.
It was across the board.
Every room that anyone ever was in?
Yeah. Delia Dietz.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for remembering that she was Delia, because I could not, and it was going to drive me crazy.
They even had like those weird sculptures and shit. Like the tools. The tools even look like her sculptures.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Tim Burton made those tools. You'll also find sex, I think.
I think so.
I think.
Whatever they were doing with those surgical tubes and clamps.
Yeah.
It looked like more work than it was worth, frankly.
Yeah, they should have just gotten in the water.
Yeah. Yep.
You'll also find gynecological instruments for working on mutant women.
Yes. That sounds like the name of a book.
Yeah,
It's like a great name for a novel.
It's a really good theme for an art show.
Yes, or an art show, yeah.
A grown man crying about ice cream.
I've been there, man.
I mean, I have too.
Like when you open up
As a
the
grown man.
you open the freezer. Hey, I need something to identify in this movie with too, okay? You open the freezer and you get the Neapolitan ice cream and all the chocolate's gone and you don't want vanilla and you don't want strawberry. That's when you cry.
I see. Thank you for explaining that to me. And the on-screen result of what I can only assume was highly questionable off-screen parenting.
Yeah, not directly.
Yeah.
I think contextually maybe you could draw that conclusion, yeah.
My argument with that one was I just can't see how you end up with brothers like that without something having gone pretty wrong in their childhood.
Or, counterpoint, maybe they're just British.
From Canada.
Yes.
You know those Canadian Brits.
Okay, so
Yes.
this movie is number 166 on our list.
I am boggled.
And I bring that up because I think maybe we should just jump right into this element because I don't actually know how you begin to classify this movie.
I don't know, but it's like I think of American Psycho as more of a horror movie than this.
Okay, interesting.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I just there's something about this that I feel like this movie is just so sad.
Yeah, so it's very sad.
A very,
Yes,
very
yeah.
sad movie, and it's about a very tender and sad boy who never grew up.
Yes, a couple of them. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Well, I guess
especially
technically one of them, yeah.
Beverly. Elliot's a little bit of a sociopath.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very Bateman-like, actually.
Yes, yeah, but even then, he's a tender Bateman. I can feel Wes selecting these quotes out of this episode already.
But yeah, it's a really interesting movie from that standpoint because like David Cronenberg, I feel like occupies a very similar space to David Lynch.
Yeah.
Where they kind of almost have their own genres.
Yeah.
Lynch probably more well known because he's got his own adjective. There's not really well, Cronenberg has become an adjective in the last like maybe 10 years or so, more widely used because like it was big on Rick and Morty. They had the Cronenberg horrors and stuff.
We made them. We Cronenberged them.
Yes,
Isn't that?
yeah. But there is a very specific kind of creepiness that comes along with a David Cronenberg movie that I don't know if you can always call horror, but a lot of his movies are generally classified that way.
Yes.
And generally what you get, and I was wondering, I thought maybe this might be sort of, he's kind of got two halves to his career.
Mm-hmm.
He's got
the Elliot half and the Beverly half.
Kind of.
Yeah.
He's got the body horror half.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also has the still kind of unnerving, but really not much body horror anymore half, where he's just doing these like really kind of weird psychological thrillers and dramas.
Yeah.
And I thought my memory was that this movie was kind of like where that line is drawn, but I was looking up at his filmography, and it's a lot more of a gradual change than I remember it being.
Yeah.
So this is 1988. He still hasn't done Naked Lunch. He still hasn't done at this point he's done The Fly, Dead Zone, Videodrome, Scanners, The Brood, Rabid, and Shivers, which are all pretty easily classifiable if you want to as horror movies.
Right. After
After this is Naked Lunch, M. Butterfly, which is a really interesting movie. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
No.
Do you know this? I can't remember if it's a play or if it's I think it's a play. It's one of those
play
weird
or an
things.
opera or something like that.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things where I believe it is a play that is based on, inside the play, there is the secondary play of Madame Butterfly, which obviously is a real play.
Yes.
But the whole story revolves around the main character, who is Jeremy Irons in the movie, falling in love with the star of this production of Madame Butterfly, who is in the play in drag. It's actually a man, and it's a very like, you know, it's been a very long time since I've seen it, but he's basically falling in love with this character, either not recognizing or not choosing not to recognize that he's in love with a man. And so there's a lot of weird kind of sexual politics and dynamics and stuff going on. It's a really, really interesting movie. Crash, even more so.
Yeah.
Crash is a movie about people who do they get turned on by car crashes, I think, or something like that. Hold on, I'll just
probably.
read it really quick.
I feel like this is one of the movies that I watched like 20 minutes of and then was like, I'm okay.
After getting into a serious car accident, a TV director discovers an underground subculture of scarred, omnisexual car crash victims who use car accidents and the raw sexual energy they produce to try to rejuvenate his sex life with his wife.
Wow.
There's like
nothing sexier than some neck injuries and back pain.
Kind of. There is like a scene where basically people are just like tonguing each other's scars and shit. It's really weird. And then he does Existence, which came out the same weekend as The Matrix, I believe. And actually
that's a bummer for him.
Yeah. And it's actually a very similar concept. It's basically about a world inside video games, kind of, essentially.
Yeah.
Very similar to The Matrix, but it's got a lot of Cronenberg flair to it.
I'm trying to remember if I saw that one.
It's got Jude Law in it.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
And then so from that point on, he kind of Existence is like his last out there science fiction horror type movie.
Yeah.
And then so after that he does Spider, which is a really interesting movie, but is pretty much just a straight kind of psychological drama.
Okay.
History of Violence, which is an interesting movie. Eastern Promises.
Oh.
Dangerous Method, which is another psychosexual thing about Freud and one of the other famous psychologists. I can't remember who. The other big one.
Jung?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
That's the extent of my psychological knowledge.
It is, Jung and Sigmund Freud. And then he's got, sorry, it keeps closing the tab on me here. Cosmopolis, which I basically haven't seen anything after Dangerous Method. But it's a lot of like, he definitely has a shift in his career.
Yeah, away from the sort of traditional horror trappings, even as he made them untraditional in his own way, but like the body horror, the gore, the special effects kind of stuff, and towards the more psychological weirdness. Yeah,
and this movie, Dead Ringers, it's not the hard line, but I do feel like this is really a transitional movie.
Yeah. Well, you said that the one he did right before this one was The Fly?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see some of the same themes in this.
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah, it's like a markedly different movie overall. Like stylistically, just like in terms of how things are presented to you.
I would love to know. I have not watched the trailer for this yet. I'm really curious if this is marketed as from the director of The Fly, because anybody who saw The Fly and then was like, "Oh man, this is going to be like that."
Yeah. Especially if they pull out anything about like the mutant women.
Right.
Which is probably what happened to me, is I probably remember the trailer more than the movie.
Yes.
Before I saw it this time around.
But yeah, he's got a very distinct style. This is much more of a pure Cronenberg movie than The Fly was.
Yeah.
And do you generally like his stuff?
You know, I always think I'm going to like it more than I do, and I always want to like it more than I do. And I think I appreciate the fact that he has a really specific viewpoint. I also don't think he's ever met a human being. Like every movie of his I have watched, it's really like the more cerebral and psychological he tries to be, the less I can connect with it, because I just feel like he has such niche concerns You know, like he has very specific issues that he's grappling with and trying to work through. And
Right.
I don't think many people share them.
Fair. Yeah.
Like not in the specific way he does. So often when I watch his movies, like they come off as really old to me. Like even this felt like early 80s to me rather than 88. Like they just because I think that's my brain's way of trying to reconcile people's behavior and the way they talk and the way they act. Like it just everybody seems like aliens to me in his movies.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely got a detachment that I find very fascinating. I do generally really like his movies. I think the later ones tend to interest me less because I do really like when he gets that nice blend of messed up psychology and the body horror aspect.
Right. And I think that's I do, you know, like I enjoy like Videodrome and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that the character's internal alienation is matched by an external alienation.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And so it makes sense that no one's acting like a human because half the things on screen aren't.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, okay, these are not people. Mm-hmm. Whereas in a movie like Dead Ringers, like ostensibly everyone in this movie is supposed to be a real human.
Right.
And very few of them seem like real humans.
Well, he has this. His characters tend to be, people who are trying to exist, knowing whether correctly or incorrectly that there is something wrong with them.
Yeah.
Like deeply, deeply wrong with them.
Yeah.
Like there's a line in this that I thought was really interesting, which was when Claire, the girl, I know we haven't really broached the movie yet, but there's a line where Claire, who's the main love interest in this, if you can call her that, says when she finds out she can't have children, she says, I can't have children. When I die, I'm not going to be anything but dead.
Right.
And that was like, whoa, that's a really intense line. I mean, I've never really thought about that, but I've kind of thought about that, you know?
No, I definitely wrote that line down too, because it is sort of like it's a very short line that encapsulates so much of somebody's internal beliefs and like personal philosophy. Sounds so like highfalutin and like intentional, but it's more just like your sort of subconscious worldview of things. It says so much about that so shortly.
Yeah.
Like how you feel about life and death, how you feel about parenthood and children and sort of the biological imperative to have children. Like it says a lot about those things extremely succinctly.
Yes.
And kind of in a throwaway line in a movie.
Yeah. And it's kind of, his movies are kind of about people who are deeply I don't know if it's movies about people who are this way or if it's movies about him who is this way. But the characters generally are deeply unsettled about the natural order of things and the concept of like being alive.
Yes.
And what inhabiting a body actually means they find deeply disturbing, or at least David Cronenberg finds it deeply disturbing.
I think that kind of goes to why his style is so recognizable and consistent, even in his more like psychological films, is that I do think every film is him. Like all of it's him. You know what I mean?
Right,
like all of it is him kind of grappling with the horrors of being a human. Like, being kind of this ghost in the machine, but the machine is meat.
Yes.
Like he cannot stand it. And all of his movies are him trying to work out a way to get through it or get around it or get outside of it or just not be just human anymore.
Yeah. And I would say another theme that runs through his movies, up through this one and definitely at least up through Crash, is he seems deeply fascinated and possibly scared of the mysteries of sex, procreation, and specifically the female body.
I was going to say, you can just end this sentence with women.
Yes, because you've got The Fly, which is all about kind of like creation and the horror of creating this new thing and her possibly giving birth to a fly monster.
Yeah, fly monster,
it's about
baby.
abortion and whatever. The Brood is very much about procreation and female reproduction. Shivers is basically a movie about an STD that will turn people into monstrous zombies.
Yep.
Rabid is essentially about a vampire who kills through sex and like a vagina-shaped mouth on her arm.
Wow.
You know,
don't know that one.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But there is I think that whole kind of thing really this is sort of the magnum opus, I think, of his
what are women and also why?
Yeah, because I think so I know you have a lot of thoughts on this movie, but this is
I
all
think we both do.
Yeah. Well, this is a long way of me saying I actually really like this movie. I think it is a great David Cronenberg movie that's kind of him, like we were kind of talking about, synthesizing all of these ideas that he has at once and all of these things that he deals with at once. So you've got the psychological aspect of stuff. You've got the psychosexual aspect of stuff. You've also got the one thing that's fun about David Cronenberg movies is generally, even though he moves away from the body horror stuff, there's always one scene where he kind of just like flexes a little bit.
Yeah.
And
there's got to be at least a little.
Yeah. And this one has not only the gynecological tools for working on mutant women.
Well, he does use them on human
That's
women,
true.
so.
But it also has the dream sequence where they are, where the two twins are fused together, and then the Claire bites the thing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful Cronenberg moment. I always love those moments in these movies because it's the moment where I feel like it's him going, "Don't worry, I'm still here." It's still a David Cronenberg movie.
That's a good point.
But yeah, I think Beverly and Elliot are two really fascinating characters.
Yeah.
Especially fascinating David Cronenberg characters.
Yeah.
Like that opening scene where they're kids is really interesting because one of them is all about, I just figured out what sex is about. And the other one is like, it sounds interesting. I would prefer it if I didn't have to touch anything.
Right.
You know?
When they're talking about like, here's how fish reproduce. Like one of them lays the eggs and the other one comes by and fertilizes them and they don't even have to touch. And I think it's Beverly is like, great. Let's do it that way.
Right. Which is, it's a really interesting setup for two characters like this who then specifically go into the field of gynecology.
Yeah.
And one of them takes advantage of it. Well, I guess they both take advantage of it, but like seeing how the two of them approach that, and they're both clearly detached from human sexuality and women and stuff to the point where they can kind of look at them as curiosities.
Yeah.
It's just, I find it all very interesting as a story.
No, it is. And I do think that they're fascinating characters, and like thank God somebody like Jeremy Irons was cast to do this because he's amazing in it.
Yeah, really, really good.
Like he is so compelling in a way that I was surprised. Like I was surprised that this is a 2-hour-long movie. And when you boil it down, not a whole hell of a lot happens.
Yeah.
It's like they are working in their practice. They meet Claire. They both sleep with her. She gets mad at them. Mm-hmm. Beverly has a relationship with her. His drug addiction gets really bad. Elliot tries to pull him out of it. Elliot gets pulled into it. Mm-hmm. And then they die.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much the movie. Like there's not a lot of like action. There's no sort of MacGuffin that they're chasing down or anything like that. But there are still these surprising, like, I think some of my favorite moments in the movie are scenes where it's Jeremy Irons talking to Jeremy.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Did he win an Academy Award for this?
No, I think he was nominated, but he didn't win it. And he was very much like, it's only because this isn't the like right, quote unquote, right kind of movie.
Possible.
Yeah. Because I definitely read a thing tonight where it talked about, Jeremy Irons was even like given 2 different trailers and 2 different dressing rooms and 2 different wardrobes. And he was like, but they're essentially the same person.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just have one. And he kept swapping pieces of the wardrobes into other wardrobes. And I was like, that's such a great, like, thoughtful idea, because these guys do seem like they would do that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, my navy blue blazer is at the dry cleaner. Let me wear yours. And then it just never goes back. Or
it's like that, but, with girlfriends.
But I think with girlfriends and with clothes and with food and with everything else, like, I think that's part of the point, is that they're so codependent that if you sever them, one of them on their own is not a full person.
Right. Yeah.
They require the other half.
Yeah. And what's funny about this to me is, like, this is almost, I don't want to say it's almost a romantic comedy, but but
by saying it like that, you essentially just got to say it.
Yeah. Don't give away my tricks, Amanda. But
this is a romantic comedy.
Well, let me explain
now
myself.
I'm wondering about your views on humanity and women and sexuality.
Well, what I mean is, like, I feel like there's another movie in here where, if traditionally the story becomes about the switcheroo that they pull on Claire.
Yeah.
Like, we were joking that this is the first, like, half of this movie is basically The Prestige.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And, there's even, like, a line of dialogue that's almost verbatim from The Prestige, I should say, in The Prestige, that is almost verbatim from Dead Ringers.
Yes.
Where Claire mentions, she's like, sometimes I really like you, but other times I really don't, or something like that.
Right. Right. Yeah. She says something like, sometimes I really like you and you're so sweet, and then other times you're just a fun lay.
Right. Yeah.
And that's all you are.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is.
Yeah. And, like, I think the normal, quote unquote, normal movie would focus in on that element of it, the three-way relationship.
Oh yeah, the love triangle would be the thing, and it would be the 2 brothers competing with each other to win her over.
Yeah.
That's what the traditional rom-com would be.
The 2 twins who now have to learn to live on their own,
right,
would have a more positive outcome.
Yeah, it would almost become like what is the Shakespeare? Is it 12th? Is it 12th Night? That's just remember. Everybody's swapping partners until they end up with the right person, kind of thing.
Sure.
One of those, you know what I mean? Midsummer's Night's Dream. One of those 2.
As You Like It.
No.
I'm just naming plays.
You could have named anyone next, and I would have said no.
Yeah.
Just
Henry V.
Oh yeah, it's that one.
Yeah.
That notorious
Falstaff
romantic comedy.
Fucks everybody in that play.
That I would believe.
But like, I feel like in that movie, she is a bigger part, and not that she's not a big part. The character is a very big part of the story, but she is gone for, like, the whole middle of the movie. Yeah,
she's a big part of the movie in that she's the closest thing to an actual person in this movie.
Right.
Like, for all of her flaws, like Claire is Claire is a really fascinating character. I actually really like her. Because she does strike me as, like, a fully formed character on her own. She's not just there to be a conquest or a love interest. Right, like, she's got her own life going on. And when she realizes the sort of fuckery that, like, the twins are kind of pulling on her, she's like, no, you're both awful. Like, it's not like Beverly can't just blame Elliot because he's the more aggressive and assertive one. It's like, no, but you went along with it.
Right.
And you have free will. So you're both shitty.
Right. Yeah.
And, like, she's got her own career, and sure, she does drugs as well, but she knows her limits and sticks by them in a way that neither Elliot nor Beverly understands how to do. And
her whole thing is almost a movie's worth of character on its own.
Yeah.
That they just barely graze the surface of.
Yeah.
Like that line, her whole thing about wanting to have children.
Yes.
Thinking, the line I said about I can't have children when I die, I'm dead. That's, like you said, in and of itself, a very explosive statement character-wise. The fact that she's got this, they call it a mutation.
Yes. A trifurcated uterus or cervix or something like that.
And also the fact that she is dangerously promiscuous.
Yeah.
It's like, that's enough character to carry a movie in and of it by itself.
Right, and then you add into the fact that she has a career and she has a successful career.
Right.
Like, people know who she is. She's clearly well regarded. There's a whole debate about the next project she's going to do after this miniseries. Her agent or whoever is like arguing with her, like, "Oh, you can't take this job. It's it's humiliating to take a job like this." And
Right.
she says, "Well, I've decided that I want to be humiliated."
Right.
So like, she's making her own career decisions on top of all this other stuff that's going on in her life. So it's and she doesn't ever sort of give in to Elliot or even Beverly. Like, she loves Bev, but she's sort of like, no, I'm going to go. I have a job in another city. I'll be gone for a few weeks. I'll be back.
Right.
I'm going to go do it. Like,
Right.
no, you can't come to the airport and cry at me.
Yeah.
You are going to stay here.
Yeah, I think in another movie, she is there for more of the story in person,
Yeah.
instead of being there for the story, but just in the way that she is not there for the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, she's interesting because she's like a catalyst for so much of what happens, but she's not the cause.
Right.
Like,
Right.
she triggers a bunch of stuff, but like, Ellie and Bev are the ones who do what they do
Right.
while she's gone.
Yeah.
She's not saying to him, well, if you really loved me, you'd sever all ties with your brother and never speak to him again. Like, there's never a moment like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if she even calls Ellie to her trailer on set and says, look, I really like your brother. I really care about him. So I figured we need to do our best to try and be friends.
Yeah.
And it's, she's not trying to come in and blow up his life. She's just trying to continue leading her own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes him fall apart. 'Cause
Yeah.
he doesn't understand how to not be codependent with someone.
Right. And that's where everything falls apart for Bev, is because instead of positioning her as, the third point of a love triangle,
Yeah.
it's, well, I guess technically it's a love triangle, but the person at the singular point in the middle that's being fought over arguably is Bev.
Right.
And even if Elliot's not really
Yeah. No, you're right. He's sort of the fulcrum in this weird arrangement where his behavior is the others are sort of just being pulled along by whatever he's kind of falling into.
Yeah. And it's funny because, like, I feel like from Claire's perspective, she's kind of like, this doesn't have to be weird.
Right.
You guys are making this weird.
Exactly.
And then from their perspective, it's like, no, you're the weird one. You have no respect for our thing.
Well, that's like the scene in the trailer that I love so much between Elliot and Claire, when she says we should try to be friends for your brother's sake. I really care about him. And he's sort of like, but you add a difficult dynamic to the Mantle brothers saga.
Yes.
And he's very focused on him and Bev as a unit, and then her coming in to their lives, their story. And he's like, well, maybe it would be easier if you liked me the same way you like him.
Yeah.
And that's kind of Elliot being like, yeah, this is how it needs to be. If you love one of us, you need to love both of us. And she's like, but I don't.
Yeah.
Because I don't like you very much. And he's like, wait, does that mean I'm different than my brother? And it like blows his mind.
I find it so fascinating because it's not a matter of them both loving Claire.
Right.
It's a matter of one of them not really giving a shit.
Yeah.
And the thing that breaks Beverly down is that he does love Claire, and he can't reconcile what that means.
Yes.
Because the only relationship he has ever known is his twin brother.
Well, they even say, like, if it weren't for Elliot kind of swapping like letting him swap places, he's like, you'd still be a virgin if we didn't do that.
Right. He's like, it's arguable. You could argue that he's not even really like interested in sex, like actually having it.
Yeah, he's interested in Ellie being interested in him having sex.
Right.
Like, he will do it because Ellie wants him to do it, and then he gets to go home and tell Ellie what he did.
Right.
And there's this whole, like,
there's that other line where Elliot says, well, come on, you haven't actually had sex until you've told me about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's no experience that you've had you haven't had an experience until you've told me about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating dichotomy between the two of them, because even before that, before he goes to Claire's apartment, Elliot says, if you don't go to her, I will, and I'll tell her I'm you, and I will do terrible things to her. And Bev's like, well, what kind of terrible things?
Right.
And then the scene cuts to him having weird
That's the
surgical
tube
tubing
scene. Yeah.
sex question mark with Claire. And it's
Something's happening.
okay, so Elliot gave you kinky ideas and then sent you off to go perform them.
Right.
And now wants you to come home and explain how it all went in detail.
Right.
Probably not something brothers typically do with one another.
No, I don't think so. But yeah, it is a really fascinating movie that to get back to the horror element of it.
Yes, or lack thereof.
Yeah, now how do I'm only saying this because you said it yesterday.
Uh-oh.
As a woman,
I got to write that in all caps.
I mean, I find this terrifying to watch what Bev does to people as he's having his breakdown.
Yes.
Like there's nothing, a doctor who is unwell while performing surgery or doing anything to you is scary across the board. But the fact that he's a gynecologist makes it even scarier, even for me.
Oh, I was gonna say, please tell me.
No, I would like to
scary.
hear. I would like to hear you talk about it because, I mean, I don't want anything to do with that shit.
Yeah. Fish in the water.
I'm just gonna plug my ears when you talk about gross girl stuff.
Gross girl stuff. Oh yeah, no. Arguably the most horrifying parts of this movie are all of the medical parts.
Yeah.
Like even early on, where it's like them kind of clearly setting up one of their patients to have sex with her. It's like you're taking advantage of this relationship where you have to be able to trust that doctor. Like,
right.
You're extremely vulnerable in front of them, and you're really, really relying on them to treat you respectfully and with dignity. And when they don't, that's a huge breach.
Right.
And then the scene that's the more obvious, like, holy shit scene, where Beverly is kind of deep in the midst of his drug problem, and he's using did they call it a reticulator?
Yeah, something like that.
And I'm pretty sure based on what we see earlier in the movie it's the device if you're having like you're having surgery like through your abdomen, or maybe even like a hysterectomy or C-section, like back in the day where they had to just go in through your abdomen rather than doing like endoscopic surgery that holds you open.
Yeah, I think
like
something
a big
that.
Like so that somebody can stick their hands in you.
Right.
And he's using that on her genitalia.
Yeah.
And then is like, no, she's the problem.
Right.
It's
that's
that is
arguably the most Cronenberg line ever written.
Yes.
Which is the tools are perfect.
The tools
it's
are
the body that's broken.
This is a solid gold mantle reticulator.
Yes.
It's high tech.
Yes.
But yeah, that's really like, that is, I think, even though it's specifically like gynecologist in this movie, I think that's relatable to so many people. The idea that like you're in a doctor's office and you're vulnerable and they're not listening to you.
Yes.
If you're saying, no, really, it hurts. And I think like commonly like women get that a lot. Like they just in general, it's a lot of those things. You go and you're getting an exam and you're like, no, really, this hurts. And they're just like, you're fine.
Right, right.
And it's like, no, I'm not. But I do think that happens to men and women in other situations. Like you go to your doctor and you say like, look, I've been having back pain. My knee feels really fucked up. Like I'm having these headaches, whatever it is. And they're just like, well, have you been taking any Advil? And you're like, yes, I've been taking. What do you mean? But I do think like those are horrifying scenes, less because of what you see and more just because they're such universally frightening experiences that lots of people have had.
Right.
But I don't know if I call them like horror scenes.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
how do you feel about going back to the running kind of imagery and ideas that go through Cronenberg's movies, how do you feel about his use of something that is generally regarded as taboo in sexuality, specifically women's sexuality, stuff that traditionally, civilized people don't talk about out in public. It's kind of like what we were talking about. It's kind of like what we were talking about with Dead and Buried. How body postmortem is similar taboo to gynecology appointments.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean, where it's like stuff that is not generally spoken of in polite company. A lot of people just don't like to think about
especially back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And I think especially in a genre like if you are somebody like Cronenberg who's coming off of The Fly, which is much more of a traditional horror movie, even as you can argue all the ways in which his version is not, but it's still recognizably a monster movie. And then you're in the 80s and you're working in the horror genre. Most of your fans are going to be men. And the next movie you're going to make is about gynecologists.
Right.
And it's sort of like you've tricked this demographic into coming into this movie. And I guarantee you there are many more dudes who got way more uncomfortable watching this than they did watching The Fly.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Not only because it deals with all the gynecological elements of it, but also there's a lot of two brothers who clearly have some sexual tension going on.
Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of implied, incestuous,
homoerotic, incestuous relationship of them just making eyes at each other across rooms.
I mean, even more than that, you've got the scene where Bev is dancing with Elliot's girlfriend.
Yes, and Elliot.
Elliot comes, basically they sandwich her.
Yep.
Like the Roxbury guys. And Elliot starts...
What a crossover. The guys from Night at the Roxbury open a gynecology office.
I would like to see that, or vice versa. Beverly and Elliot are going out clubbing together. And then he reaches over and puts his hands on her hands.
Yes.
And moves her hands all over Bev's body.
Yeah.
It's pretty fucking weird.
Yes.
And it's kind of it. I mean, Cronenberg just knows how to find the right uncomfortableness. Like it's so unique and so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
In a way that's just kind of hard to quantify.
Yeah, it's this knee jerk.
Because it's not like they're like fucking each other.
No.
That would almost be less weird.
Right. Well, because then you could just write this off as some, some fucking weirdo made a crazy movie. Like, this is all schlocky shock factor kind of stuff. And instead it's really like weirdly sincere from Elliot.
Right.
Like he really, he's not like, he really is distressed by Beverly pulling away from him and doesn't know how to deal with it and is like desperate to keep him in a way that it's sort of like you sympathize with him almost, and then that makes you feel even weirder about everything that's happening because you're like, well, he does actually seem to really care about his brother, and he's trying to get him to kick the drugs and all of this stuff. So I mean, that's good, but also I think something weird is going on here.
Well, one of the other things that I think another movie does is I think in a different version of this, Elliot, there's a section of the movie where Elliot pushes Beverly away.
Oh yeah.
Which they specifically don't do.
Yeah.
Because the whole story, it's not Beverly trying to figure things out. It's Beverly is trying to remove himself from this, they constantly refer to each other as Siamese twins, even though they are not. But,
there's the whole... they
psychologically or whatever. But.
Yeah, and they sort of talk about, is it Chang and Ang?
Yes.
The first documented case of, like, physically joined twins. They constantly compare themselves to that story.
Yeah. But yeah, there's no moment or sequence where Elliot, out of frustration, pushes Beverly away. if he doesn't even realize what's going on with Beverly because he's just disappeared. He's gone to live with Claire for a while.
Yeah.
And then when he finally does see what happens, he immediately is like, all right, let's figure this out.
Right.
And then when he can't figure it out, his solution is, well, we are out of sync. We need to get back into sync, which means I have to start doing drugs.
Right. Like, this wasn't really part of my plan. But if I can't get you to stop, it's better for us to be on the same trajectory than for one of us to be okay and the other one to be falling apart.
Right.
It's better if we're both falling apart.
Yeah.
If we can't both be okay.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because at no point, like, Beverly is never trying to become a healthier person.
No.
That's not his goal in detaching from Ellie. He's like, oh, I want to detach from Ellie so I can attach myself to Claire. Mm-hmm. That's the only way he knows how to operate.
Right.
Like, he meets her and they sleep together and they end up in a relationship, and then he essentially moves in with her right away.
Right.
Because he's just like, well, I'm going to go from Ellie's in my house to your house.
Yep.
And when you go off for work, I'm going to within a week have a total meltdown.
I will say, she left for 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And seemingly didn't, I guess she tried to call him later.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you got to call and say, hi, I made it. You know, like.
Well, maybe she did, and we
That's
just
true.
didn't see that.
Good
It
point.
seemed really soon after she leaves.
Regardless of whether she did or she didn't.
They've also been dating for like, it seems like 3 weeks.
Right.
This is a Brundle and whatever her name is.
Yes.
Length relationship.
Yeah,
They're going at that speed.
Regardless of whether she did or didn't call him.
Yeah.
He is inexperienced enough that
Yes.
if she's gone for more than like a day,
Yeah.
he immediately goes to paranoia and, you know, where is she? When she called me? He calls her. A guy picks up and he loses his fucking mind.
Immediately.
Right.
Like, there's no, and that's kind of why, you know, when we did the summary of this movie and we were laughing at the unintentionally deceives him,
Mm-hmm.
the unintentional deception, quote unquote, was that he calls her hotel room and a man picks up the phone.
Right.
And it's just like, that's it. She's there for work.
Right.
But he's never like, who is this? It's her secretary, right? It's like her assistant.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
What is he
She
defiantly gay?
Defiantly gay, and you
really-
succeeded in disgusting him completely
Yeah,
because
that's really
he
good.
talks in detail about her anatomy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, like even that, it's like it's even grossing people out in the movie.
Yes.
Like even in the world of this movie, people don't talk this way.
Oh, repeatedly, because
Yeah.
there's a scene at the beginning where Claire is meeting up with Dr. Mantle, whichever one of them it is, who did her exam. I think at the time it's Elliot, but I don't know if she thinks it's Elliot or Beverly, whatever. So she's at a restaurant with her agent and they're having this debate about her next project. And then the doctor is there too. And she, in the middle of the conversation, she's kind of done with the conversation. And the way she dismisses this agent is she turns to the doctor and she says, well, you know, tell me about my cervix or tell me about my
Yes.
uterus or whatever. And the other guy is immediately like, oh, look at the time. I'm going to be late for that next thing. Goodbye. And like skedaddles out of there as quick as he can.
Yeah.
Because they're talking about lady parts.
And you know, that's honestly one of the things that I really like about this.
Yeah.
And how I think it does differ from some of his other movies that might kind of dance around the same subject matter. Is I think in the other movies
Dance sensuously with their
Sensual,
brother
yes.
in the living room around these matters.
I think the other movies are him possibly working through some things that he doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Here, I don't think that he's doing this stuff because he's like trying to gross people out because it's like, yeah, lady parts are gross and weird, right?
Yeah.
Like he knows what he's doing because the characters in the movie are responding that way.
Yes.
Like the people, it is a point of contention in the movie that people are grossed out by this stuff. They probably shouldn't be, obviously.
Right.
But they are. Like
Yeah.
her frustration and using that as a weapon to get him out of there is a perfect example of that, where she as a character is, you know, talking about perfectly normal stuff, but she knows that it's uncomfortable for people to hear. And I really like that he is consciously doing that to the people in the movie.
Yes.
And the people watching the movie.
Yes.
Which makes the use of it a little bit more thoughtful.
Yeah,
than I think it could be.
And I agree, and I think you're right in that I don't think Cronenberg himself is sitting there going like, yeah, ew, girl parts. Like, I think he's looking at it, or at least trying to present it the way that a medical professional would. Like, they use the correct terminology for the different parts of female anatomy. You know, they're not just like, there's not a lot of talk of like when they just call it the vagina, and all of it's the vagina. Like, they're naming the different parts of what they're examining on her. And there's even like Ellie's giving a lesson and they're talking about fallopian tubes and like it's just medical science. It's just like a purely academic pursuit for these characters, like the actual medical part of it. And I think that it's really interesting that they're talking about it in this clinical way. And all these side characters are sort of like, I don't want to hear this.
If he was talking about heart surgery, nobody would bat an eye.
Right, yeah. If we were talking about, the left ventricle of her heart was whatever, everybody would just be like, oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. And that is, and I do really appreciate him doing that stuff.
David Cronenberg, feminist hero.
Yeah.
Happy Women's History Month, everyone.
I think that's where we're ending up here. But no, I do appreciate it because it is a different it is a strange sort of like, I think generally with him the idea is that, like we said earlier, the human body full stop is fucking weird and kind of gross, and it's amazing that it exists.
Yes.
And I think that his use of this stuff is a very it's just such a conscious and I don't really know what else to say about it, but I just I enjoy I like that he's doing it, and I like that he's trying to make people feel weird in a very specific way.
Yes. Yeah, in sort of playing on that societal knee-jerk sort of like, no, we don't talk about that.
Yeah, because I mean it's like watching this, like, I'm sure these are all questions he has in his own mind, and I'm sure he probably has reacted this way as well. So it's
like, all women are mutants, therefore.
Yeah, it's like I remember I forget what I was watching, but it was an interview with Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Oh yeah,
who captain of the weird ship over there. But like, he's a very eccentric person and gives very animated, weird interviews.
I can only imagine.
And I remember one time he was talking about like how weird it is to have a penis. And it's like, okay. And he's like, is that not the weirdest thing in the world? It's just like a thing that's hanging off and it gets bigger and smaller and you pee with it. And it was just like, I mean, I've never thought about it specifically like that, but you bring up a good point.
Yeah. Yeah. If you look at it all from like the abstract alien point of view,
exactly.
It's like, what the hell is that all about?
Yeah. What about the look of this movie? Because
you mean Interiors by Delia Dietz?
Because Cronenberg movies are very interesting to me because I have never thought of, I should say before this one, I have never really thought of Cronenberg as a very like production design minded director. The Fly looks great.
Yeah.
But I think that has a lot of like Hollywood gloss to it in a way that his other ones don't. But like a lot of his older movies, because he shoots them all in Toronto, just like most of Scanners just takes place in like municipal buildings.
I feel like it's such a weird, he has such a weird soulless kind of vibe about like, there's always something vaguely uncanny about all of his, like all of the sets and the design in his movies, like the interiors of places and the buildings, like they all feel weirdly sterile.
Yes.
Even when they're over decorated, it feels like no one has ever actually lived in any of these places.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, I mean, this one feels so overwhelmingly like 80s to me in all the styling that it's like hard sometimes to like, I found myself distracted by random shit in backgrounds.
Sure.
Where it was just like, what the fuck is that statue? What is that weird fake flower arrangement? You know, like there was just so many things in it. I was just like, that is distracting.
I legitimately didn't know what were sets and what were like actual locations they were shooting at.
Everything felt like a set to me.
Yeah,
because none of it felt like a house a human would have decorated that way.
Like his like their apartment absolutely has to be a set.
Yeah, I would hope so.
I would think. But like that weird like faux marble like room where they do that the award sequence when Elliot gets the award, like that feels like a set, but I it probably isn't, because that would be an incredibly expensive set to build, I would think.
Yeah, and then I also had a problem where there were different times where I wasn't sure, were they in their offices at the practice or were they in their home?
Sure.
I had a few different times where I was just like, wait, where are we? Because I can't tell the difference between your gynecology practice space and your apartment.
Yes.
Like, that tells you something right there.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a very interestingly designed. I feel like this has more of a design to it than a lot of his other ones do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the surgical team all wearing blood red surgical gowns.
Oh my God.
Is probably the most the strongest design I've ever seen him go with.
Yeah.
Because that's like out of, you know,
Suspiria or something.
Yeah, Suspiria. I was thinking of the Devils for some reason, like because the nun outfits are all very iconic
robes
and stuff. Yeah, but it's such a choice.
Yes,
that feels very unrealistic and very theatrical.
Yeah, yeah,
and it's the kind of visual choice that I feel like he doesn't make that often.
I totally agree.
But that being said, it's fucking looks awesome. I mean, that in and of itself is terrifying. Seeing all those, you know, that's scary enough.
I would be like, please put me on under anesthesia before you all get your gowns on, because I don't want to see that shit.
Yeah,
I don't want to make it look like I'm about to be sacrificed to a cult or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you have any? We're kind of rounding out. Did you have anything else you want to talk about? Did you like this movie?
That's a complicated question.
Mm-hmm.
I liked parts of it. I appreciate a lot of it, but I don't think it's the sort of movie that I could see myself like rewatching or even saying to people like who I would recommend this to people I knew liked Cronenberg or liked weird ass movies. But this is not one of the movies where I would say to somebody like, oh, you know what? I think you should actually watch Dead Ringers. Like, I think you'd be into that.
You don't just want to have like a handful of people over?
No. And I don't think
cheese and crackers and watch Dead Ringers?
Cheese and crackers and some barbiturates.
Yeah. Yeah,
and maybe some what does he say? Oh God. It's like Percodan or something just because it's Saturday.
Yeah.
One of those.
Yes. At the end when they're both all fucked up and they're listing their menu for the next week is pretty fun.
Yes, because they're gonna go through the rest of the drugs, and then on Monday they're gonna be done.
Yes. Famous last words.
They gotta pull it together on Monday.
I do the same thing every time I try to start a diet.
I thought you were gonna say I do the same thing every weekend.
Oh well, technically, yes.
I take all my drugs and I try to kick it by Monday so I can get to work.
But I do the same thing all the time where it's like, well, I mean, I'm gonna start eating right on Monday.
Yes.
So
Friday,
I got 3
wings.
birthday parties to go to this weekend, so I'm just gonna live it up.
I don't know. I guess I do have a couple things in my notes where I just kept saying that this is a really interesting movie to think about. I don't have a specific point saying this, but just in terms of movies we've watched already, it's really interesting to put something like this next to Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Okay.
Where there is that like codependent sibling relationship and how different. Like, I think the differences between the two are what interested me when I was thinking about it, where it was just like both of these sibling pairs cannot exist without the other and are who they are because of the other and can't escape one another, but they go in kind of totally opposite directions, where like Elliot and Beverly are so codependent they think of themselves as one person. And Jane and her sister, whose name I'm blanking on, is she a Blanche? I want to call her Blanche.
Yes, I believe it's Blanche.
I think it's Blanche. are so polar opposite and have like essentially would disavow each other as quickly as they could. But in the end, they all kind of end up in the same place.
Yeah.
You know, where they have this like moment of regression. Because like at the very end of Dead Ringers, Elliot is, you know, they're having a fake birthday party, and Elliot wants cake and orange pop and cries because mommy forgot to buy ice cream. And like they both have sort of gone back to this idyllic childhood moment, and then they end up dead.
Yes, in a very, very interesting fashion, where they have talked about themselves being Siamese twins.
Yes, and
I think Elliot even says something in that moment where he's like, "It's time to separate" or something like that.
Yeah,
and
they are. I think in that sequence they're referring to each other as Chang and Ang.
Yes.
Yeah.
And apparently the only way they can do that is if one of them is dead. Which I mean, they are under the intense effects of drugs. So, yeah. But I've always found this ending to be really, really interesting because I'm not really sure what to make of it.
Yeah.
I do like that they essentially foreshadow it by talking about the Siamese twins, where he's like, yeah, one of them died and the other one died from fright.
Yeah.
And it's like a flashy story, but the point of the story is that one couldn't exist without the other.
Right.
And even though Bev and Elliot are not literally conjoined twins, the same thing happens is they can't coexist. One of them can't coexist without the other one. I always thought the choice of the way that he kills him is weird. Like he just kind of like cuts him open.
Yeah, he sort of just... I wonder if part of it goes back to his nightmare where they're joined in the abdomen. It's almost like an umbilical cord.
Maybe he's...
metaphor.
Yeah, maybe he's like... in his drug-addled brain, he's cutting him, where the metaphorical connection would be or something.
Right, right. And the medical devices he made for quote-unquote mutant women... in the end, he ends up saying they're actually for separating Siamese twins.
Yeah.
That's what he ends up saying that they actually are. Yeah. So it's interesting. What kind of confused me at first was the fact that Elliot kind of volunteers to be killed, essentially. Yeah. Bev does it, climbs up onto the other table and passes out, wakes up in the morning, debatably realizes that he's killed his brother, but also kind of just whimpers his name a bunch.
I think he realizes it, but he's in denial, obviously.
Right, in shock and whatever.
Yeah.
And then he pulls himself together. He shaves and gets dressed and clean clothes and all of that. He packs a bag. He walks out like he's gonna go. So I get for first I kind of didn't get why does he leave, call Claire, and then immediately hang up and go back. And I think I came around to the belief that it's sort of like Elliot was supposed to die so that he could go off and be with Claire and not have it be weird and complicated anymore.
That's pretty short-sighted.
I know. Well, look, don't take drugs and make plans.
Yeah.
They never come out the way you want them to.
Right. Can't tell you how many businesses I didn't end up going into.
How many restaurants you didn't open.
Exactly.
But so it's like, is it kind of just like he then realizes he can't do it, so he just goes back and ODs?
I think the manner of his death is left purposefully vague.
Okay.
I think it is supposed to mirror the Chang and Ang, where one of them had a stroke and the other one just died, and they're like, he died from fright. It's like,
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does that
or
look like?
sepsis.
Right. But yeah, I think it's supposed to be he's now on his own.
And he just can't do it.
Yeah, he takes the first step and realizes that he doesn't want to after all that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you came across this. Did you know that this is based on a true story?
Yes.
Very fascinating.
Yes, but the true story is not nearly as sordid as this. It sounds like
there seems to be a lot more mystery to it.
Right. Where it was kind of like there were twin brothers. They were both gynecologists,
Yes.
I believe.
Yep.
And they lived in New York City, had good upbringings, good careers, and lived together, lived in an apartment together, and then died like within days of each other or something.
Yes. On July 17th, 1975, the brothers were found dead in separate rooms of Cyril's. Their names were Stuart and Cyril Marcus.
Ooh.
Separate rooms of Cyril's Manhattan apartment at 450 East 63rd Street. The apartment was strewn with filth that had apparently accumulated over an extended period of time, much like in the movie. Suspected factors in the death include mental illness and a possible suicide pact.
Oh.
It was first assumed that the brothers had died of barbiturate withdrawal, but the final report excluded this. The original toxicological report had been in error. Stewart died probably between July 10th and 14th of a barbiturate overdose. Cyril died between July 14th, when he was last seen out of the apartment, apparently after Stewart had died, and July 17th. His body showed no signs of the fatal convulsions accompanying narcotic withdrawal.
Huh.
So I think generally it's chalked up to drugs, but at least for one of them, who
Question
knows?
mark. Yeah.
He just went back in and laid on top of him and died.
No, separate rooms, Clay.
Ah, right.
Separate rooms. These twin brothers were not in a homoerotic relationship.
This is
Maybe.
it's a really fascinating story though, and I can 100% see Cronenberg being like, yes.
Yeah, because there's so much ambiguity in there
Yeah.
that you can kind of fill in the like, who were these people and what actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the first time that I saw Dead Ringers, I got very excited during this final sequence because knowing it was a Cronenberg movie,
Yeah.
I thought he was turning the juice up. I thought he was cutting him open because he was going to crawl inside of him. And on my first viewing, I was very disappointed that was not the case.
This is why I don't understand why you don't like the NBC Hannibal show. This is why. This is why, Clay.
It's because the movie's not about two psycho murderer gynecologists fighting two other psycho.
I mean,
to be fair, as I've said before, I do need to go back and give that show another shot.
Yes.
Because I think I was not appreciating how weird it was going to be.
Yes.
And so,
you just have to
took it too
suspend.
literally.
Yeah, you have to suspend your disbelief and pretend that that show takes place in a parallel universe where serial killers are like just an endemic problem, like a rodent problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
Why not?
Yeah. But yeah, where else to go? I think we kind of covered everything. The music is by David Cronenberg regular Howard Shore, who most well known as being the guy who did the music for the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Oh shit!
He has done, I believe,
most well known by everyone but me.
Yeah, I believe he has done. Well, he's one of those guys where it's like he's all over the place. Mm-hmm. But I think most famously he's probably known to most people as the guy who did the Lord of the Rings music.
Yeah.
But then you look into his stuff and he goes, oh, he's actually also done every one of David Cronenberg's movies. Huh. Then you go a level deeper, you find out he was actually the first musical director on Saturday Night Live.
Wow. Yeah. What a career.
I know.
Jesus.
Very varied career.
It's always interesting to me when you find those people sort of lurking in the background of like so many projects where it's like, oh yeah, that person who did this. And also all of those and also all of these and also was a concert pianist at one point. You're like, what?
With his music, though, especially in Cronenberg movies, the music never really sticks with me. It's never stood out to me and go like, oh, shit, great score from Howard Shore. It's always just kind of there.
Yeah.
In Lord of the Rings, it's a very sweeping and there's melodies that you recognize and stuff, but I
wonder though how much of that is like somebody like Cronenberg strikes me as somebody who wouldn't be overly concerned with the soundtrack and therefore would be like, yeah, I don't want any big flashy stuff. I just want stuff to kind of bolster the mood of the scene and then quietly go away.
Yeah. It's just another thing with Cronenberg that I find so fascinating is like sometimes I feel like he thinks the trappings that come along with making a movie are just stuff he has to do. Like he's like, yeah, I mean, I got to use the camera I don't really feel like designing anything.
Yeah.
Though.
Characters have to have names and wear clothes.
Yeah, I guess there's got to be music, but
Yeah.
I
mean, I guess we have to light it.
Exactly. Find me the biggest mall cafeteria you can, so I don't have to light anything.
Fluorescent tubes forever.
But yeah, like he's a very interesting. I actually kind of, I find him similar to David Lynch in that way, where David Lynch sometimes goes all in on like visuals and cinematography and stuff.
Yeah.
But other times his movies just look kind of flat. Like like half of Mulholland Drive, unbelievably shot. The other half of Mulholland Drive just kind of looks like somebody had a camera at a Denny's.
I think the difference is, though, that like with David Lynch, because he can go so far in the like kind of beautifully shot or very, very well constructed stuff, you then kind of wonder, well, is the other stuff really flat on purpose? Is it flat to say something?
Sure.
Whereas with Cronenberg, I really think it's because he's like, no, that's not the point.
Right.
That's not what I care about. That's not what's important.
Right.
This other stuff is what's important.
Very possible, yeah. His movies tend to get better looking as they go.
As his budgets get slightly more robust, maybe.
Like, I think The Fly is a big turning point as far as, like, visually looks really good. Dead Ringers looks great. The later movies, like Spider, is really interestingly shot. And, History of Violence and Eastern Promises are both really interesting movies.
Yeah, I still can't believe he did Eastern Promises.
I know. That he has really weird movies.
Yeah.
That you go, oh, yeah, that movie. And I didn't bring this up earlier. What do you think about the names, Beverly and Elliot? That they specifically call out that one of them is named after, it has a woman's name. Yeah,
I sort of wonder... funny enough, I'm of two minds about this. I kind of wonder if it's almost a little bit of they're sort of doing the masculine, feminine, yin and yang sort of thing, where it is like they are like two sides of the same coin. So therefore, if one of them is the assertive masculine presence, the other one is the more emotional feminine presence. Like, I could see that reading. I could also see it kind of just being a little bit of a red herring.
Okay.
Like something to just make Beverly insecure.
Because he gets really mad about it.
Exactly.
When she brings it up.
Yeah. It like really touches a nerve with him. And I do think it's connected to the fact that he is the sort of like sensitive, subordinate one. And there is this like feminization of him. He cries a lot. He's very emotionally needy and clingy. He's moody. He has bad impulse control. Like he's kind of ruled by his appetites at any given moment. He's sort of forced to stay in the home. Like he's domesticated in a way that Ellie isn't. Ellie goes out and gives speeches and presentations and lectures at universities, and Bev is supposed to stay and kind of keep the fire in the hearth stoked. You know what I mean?
That's what you're saying women should be doing.
Well, that's the stereotype, and I think
but that's what you're saying.
Sounds like that's what you're saying.
Listen, it's your words, not mine.
I mean, they sound like your words though.
But
we are synchronized. You don't understand. Yeah.
I wonder if it has something to do with like I think everything you just said is correct. But I also wonder if it has something to do with like that's the biggest difference between the two of them is that he has a much different name, and just the fact that he has a different name like that is enough for him to get free. I don't know. It's probably I think it's probably all of those things.
Yeah.
Because he definitely is. They are presented very differently as far as Elliot is much more of a traditionally masculine type.
Yeah.
And Beverly is much more of a traditionally feminine lady.
He's a very traditional lady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the one that acts like a broad.
But I think you're right. I think it would be really different if they were Elliot and Edward.
Yes. Yeah.
Like that would be a different dynamic. That would sort of put them on even more equal footing, where it is sort of like, having the more meek twin be named Beverly. It's sort of like a nature versus nurture thing then. You're like, is he the more meek twin because he just is and he happens to be named Beverly? Or is he the more meek twin because he was named Beverly? Right.
It does bring to mind how many, stories that I've heard of people, of men who were raised as how many? It's like 3. The one that stands out to me is H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh yeah.
When he was growing up, he was raised essentially as a girl.
Yeah.
His mother made him wear girls' clothing and all this kind of stuff. And I wonder if there's, because doesn't Beverly actually make a joke about that kind of? Where he's like, my mother wanted girls, and so I had
that. Yeah, it's when Claire is kind of saying like, so why are you named Beverly? Like, what's that all about? It's a woman's name, and he's like, well, no, it's spelled different. And she's like, well, I mean, you're still named Beverly though. What's your brother's name? Like Melissa, or like she says something like that, and
based on IMDb, it's not spelled differently.
And then Beverly goes off on like, what are you trying to say? That that makes me gay, or that my mother only really wanted girls? Like, what is this bullshit? Like, he gets really mad at her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that Cronenberg's never made a movie about someone like that who was
a boy named Sue.
Yeah, basically, because it seems like it's right in the pocket of the thing that he'd be fascinated by.
Yeah.
Yeah. All around, very. I think there is so much to talk about in this.
Yes.
Like there's so many different. I said, we could have done an hour just talking about Claire.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
It's a really fascinating, really interesting movie. But
yes,
the question at the end of the day. Does the placement on the list work for you? Do you want it to be higher, lower, or I can tell by your face? The answer is you probably would like to take it off the list.
Correct.
Interesting.
I don't know. It's.
I get it. I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, and I know this movie is very beloved by the people who like it, and I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I really enjoyed it. I think it's extremely well done. But it's sort of like, just because something is upsetting or frightening or difficult to think about, I don't think that makes it a horror movie in the genre of horror.
Like eating sushi.
I don't know what you mean by that.
It's horrible. It's terrifying to think about.
Why? I'm confused. I think sushi's delicious.
No, I do too.
But it's kind of like, when you watch a movie about the Holocaust,
which I do frequently,
all the time, you constantly have them on, but they're horrifying.
Yeah,
they're horrifying
right.
to watch, to think about. Just in general, like horrific doesn't even begin to describe it. But they're not horror movies.
Right.
And so I keep thinking with this one, I really do compare it a lot in my head to American Psycho, where I'm like, if we were both really reluctant for American Psycho to be on this list, why does this one qualify so much more unequivocally?
Well, if we're going by Wes's standard of horror, usually means a supernatural element of some form, which doesn't need to necessarily be literally supernatural, but supernatural in like the larger sense of supernatural. So not necessarily ghosts, but like an element that may as well be supernatural, if that makes sense.
Sure. Michael Myers.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I almost feel like the Cronenberg element is the supernatural element.
His just overarching vibe.
Yeah, like the dream sequence. Like you're not going to see that in like a drama,
You're not, but it's such a...
If you did, I'd watch it.
It's still... I know thematically that scene's really important, but it's still such a small piece of a much bigger movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not trying to argue that it's fully not a horror movie at all. Like,
sure.
I think
Totally.
like psychological thriller, psychological horror, just completely unquantifiable if you want to go in that direction, sure. I just have a tough time with it on this list.
Yeah.
Like, should this be on the list over a movie like Starry Eyes?
No. Well, I think the thing I have to do is I have to remove David Cronenberg from the equation.
Yeah.
Because, like, I feel like his stuff is so weird and is so much its own thing that it kind of like, if you have to pick a basket to put it in.
Yeah. And I think, you made a great point about sort of like the way you put this movie in context with all of his other movies and how it is sort of him chewing on the same themes and issues and like evolving those things. Like, if you're looking at it contextually in that way, I can see why you'd put it on this list.
Yeah.
But if you're just looking at this movie.
Yeah.
I know we're out of sync.
I know.
One of us is going to have to die.
Yeah, I guess, no, I don't disagree with you.
Hooray.
I guess I'm just, maybe the supernatural element is the human body.
Good night, folks.
She is a trifecate, which is, I don't know if that's something, can that actually happen? I
have no idea. I don't think so, but I have no idea.
Yeah, it's tough because I think it's too this is so much a David Cronenberg movie that it's very difficult for me to remove that from the discussion.
Yeah.
But I don't disagree that in the grand scheme of horror movies, I don't think I would put this on the list. If someone was going to say, name 200 horror movies, would I say this as one of the movies? Probably not.
Yeah.
I would probably say a lot of other Cronenberg movies.
It's really painful for you to sort of admit that this doesn't belong here.
It's not. It's only painful because honestly, I don't know why it's painful. Like there's something that I find unnerving enough about this movie that I'd be like, yeah, I would call it a horror movie. But at the same time, it's like Videodrome is extremely weird and supernatural. I don't really know if I'd call Videodrome a horror movie.
Right.
I don't really know what I would call it. I guess it's probably closer to science fiction. But
I was going to say, and I think that's maybe part of what we're both struggling with is just the Cronenberg of it all, where it's kind of like genres just don't apply.
Yeah.
There's just not a clear bucket for it. So here it goes.
For the sake of people listening, so we don't spend 45 more minutes listening to me hemming and hawing over this, I am going to say, yeah, okay. I don't think it's a horror movie.
Ha ha! I win.
Okay.
It would be on your 300 best horror movies of all time list.
Yeah, it's just so like, it's so tough though, because like there's so many, even on this list, there's so many movies where I would be like, I would put Dead Ringers on this, even movies that are more horror movies.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just think I think you're right. I think it's just the David Cronenberg of it all. Yeah. Where it's like, it's got to go somewhere. It's not going on the Rotten Tomatoes 200 best dramas of all time.
Yeah, no.
Or thrillers of all time. You know, it's like, I don't know where you put it.
Yeah. And the struggle is it's a good enough movie that you feel like it should be on one of those lists.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it belongs here.
Yes.
But if it needs a place to stay, the door is open.
Yeah.
Anyway. That's going to do it for Dead Ringers. I hit the randomizer button. Beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, 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 beep, boop. And next time, we'll be continuing on a similar theme. Well, not really, but it's sort of like
more twin gynecologists.
No, we will be doing a movie called, it's number 196, called It's Alive.
Oh.
Which is a monster baby movie.
Huh.
Yeah. I've never seen it. It's by Larry Cohen, who is a well-known kind of schlocky filmmaker. I'm looking forward to it. The trailer is hilarious.
All right.
It's going to be a good watch, I think. I think we're going to have fun with this one.
All right. I'm excited.
But thank you guys for listening. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/The Penske File. Join our Patreon, where you can listen to Amanda and Mize. What's the correct grammar there? Mine and Amanda's, I guess. Amanda and mine's. Our coverage.
There it is.
Of the Friday the 13th series that we did all last year. This year we're doing the second string of Stephen King films. So a bunch of Stephen King movies that are not on our main list. January was It Chapter 2. February was Silver Bullet. March was/is Salem's Lot. Yes. And we'll be going on from there. It's very fun. You'll have a good time. And on top of that, there's all sorts of other stuff to listen to. There's more podcasts than you could possibly listen to in a human lifetime. So you'll need your twin brother to listen to half of them and then tell you about them.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Clay.
And we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.